Good evening, everybody, on this Monday. Welcome back to the interview room for part 2.
Possible GTA suspect there now, 4730.
They're playing my song.
In the parking lot above the merry-go-round. 2 males, no further description, adding striping to a black Cadillac 4-door, possibly exchanging plates, vehicle license Utah 2904, in California, Paul William Nora 011, code 2 incident 3196.
Wilshire units additional 211 in progress, 1818 Southwest Moreland Boulevard,
I forgot how passionate everybody is about this case. We love it.
On the southbound Harbor Freeway from the Hollywood Freeway. It is
so many opinions, so many directions.
Southwest units, all units.
We look forward to talking about that even further this evening. Give it a couple more minutes here. We want to welcome everybody. Hopefully you're staying safe from the storms that are out there. I know on the East Coast, the Midwest. We want to thank each and every one of you for being here, from our friends over in the pond, over in England, Germany, Australia, and of course our friends north of us in Canada, starting with our dear mod, Miss Sophia, Mimi J2, Maui Girl, Teresa, and Laura. The best, in my opinion, on YouTube. I hope you feel the same way. If this is your very first time here on the interview room, we want to welcome you. We want to thank you for being here. We're so grateful. And we've got a bunch of new members that have jumped in tonight, and we're so thankful to each and every one of you. Without you, we cannot do this program. And so for that, as always, it is the audience that makes a program and has made us successful. Without you, we would not be here on YouTube at all. And so for that, we thank you. And we just ask one thing that you do here while you're here with us. And that is, if you like what you're hearing, please hit that subscribe button. And I guess you're supposed to tap the bell as well, so you get notified on all, upcoming programs. And, I read through a lot of the comments from last night's program. This is, again, part 2. I'm approaching this from an investigative analysis aspect. I'm not, like I said yesterday, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just looking at the reports that were written by the officers on scene, and then I'm applying that principle based on, if I was the investigator getting these reports from the responding officers, and putting together a big puzzle with a potato chip and seeing if I could find all the corners and make it make sense. That's the area that I am coming from tonight. and where I was coming from last night. I know some folks were saying, well, you're only concentrating on the garrote. Some have called it a loop, string. There's a lot of different names, but it is a garrote. That weapon was utilized very cleanly, numerous occasions, on numerous times for that victim, JonBenet, and the ME's office confirmed it. And the ME's office also said, essentially, that there were some indications. I know a lot of people are thinking, and I want to be careful what I say here. A lot of people have been saying, well, this is all staged. It's staged. Okay. Post-mortem, i.e. she's already gone, and the family stages this to cover up for the family, or up for the, one of the family members, whatever. Okay. Well, that certainly should be discussed. However, there are some problems, with that particular theory. And the first problem comes directly from the autopsy report. So this is JonBenet's autopsy report, and also other people were saying that the DNA is not in the underwear, etc. There's a lot of opinions out there, but that's okay, and that's a good thing. But this is the actual law enforcement, medical examiners' documents. This is what will go to trial, these documents. Okay. And if we look at the second paragraph here, external evidence of injury, he talks about, where some abrasions are. And then in the third sentence down, in the lateral aspect of the left lower eyelid on the inner congenital surface of a 1 millimeter in maximum dimension is petechiae hemorrhaging. Now, what this tells us is she was alive while being strangled. And it goes on, the doctor goes on to say, very fine, less than 1 millimeter petechiae hemorrhaging are present on the skin of the upper eyelids bilaterally, as well as on the lateral left cheek. Now, what's happening here is the smaller capillaries of our system is, as she's being strangled, her heart is still beating. So if they staged this, then they killed her while doing it, I guess is where I'm going here. And that's it's probably not a probable of occurrence. Now, if we go back up to her clothing, in the above paragraph, it says there are long white underwear, because some folks had put in the chat and the comments last night that her underwear wasn't, belonged to a cousin. Her mom bought it for a cousin, but okay, fine. But here the ME is talking about the underwear she's wearing. It says the long underwear are urine stained anteriorly over the crotch area and anterior legs. No defects are identified. Beneath the long underwear are white panties with printed rosebuds and the words Wednesday on the elastic band. The underwear is urine stained, and the inner aspects of the crotch are several red areas of staining measuring up to 0.05 inches and maximum dimension. Now, that means she's wearing her underwear. There are red stains in the crotch area of that underwear. It also means that she has urinated. Well, if you have ever seen a child strangled, you also see every bit of that evidence that was just described there sometimes. Because the bowels, let go as pressure is being applied on the victim's neck. So again, I want to just focus not on the pretzel, i.e. the note. We will get there, okay? We will get there. But I think it's imperative right now that we stay with the evidence one step at a time, meaning the first responding officers, the detectives, there goes Buddy again, and what they wrote, what they saw, and what they were thinking, i.e. they put it down on paper. So what we know as evidence is there are definitely indications that this child was alive and she was strangled while alive. Now, I could go on for days about that, and we could talk to experts for years about that. Okay. And that tells us a tremendous amount about the hunter. To me, that takes the boy at 10 years old almost out of the circle immediately. For a couple of reasons. The sophistication of understanding even what a mechanism or weapon device you would have to manufacture to torture your sister, it doesn't make sense for a 10-year-old. If you have any 10-year-olds out there, ask them to make a garrote. It ain't happening. Okay, it's not happening. That's just not common sense. Now, if you have somebody who has a military background or something to that effect, absolutely keep it on the table. But take the other stuff out of the circle. Okay. Now, another irony here is, a colleague of mine, Peter Hyatt, who is also on the Cold Case Foundation, by the way. He is a statement analysis guy, and he's done some great work on looking at this case. So I will never, ever doubt what he's thinking at all. But I'm also going to not dismiss what evidence is staring us in the face. And that evidence is also what the officers wrote. So this is just as good in terms of what they were saying and doing as much as the family members and friends. So I'm back at page 11 tonight, because that's where we left off last night. And I will tell you right up front, I'm not one of these individuals that just shoots from the hip. I am unfortunately methodical in my thought process. And that's what gave me a 90% solvability rate. 9 out of 10 times, I knew you did it, and or I could put bracelets on you. It didn't mean I could convict you in a court of law. Primarily because we didn't have the evidence. So when we think about what's going to happen soon with the new chief taking on a conversation with Mr. Ramsey and saying, look, let's talk about it, i.e. let's talk about the DNA and how far DNA has progressed, what items are still available. I would like to see the investigation also test the cigarette butts from the other incident of the other little girl that went to the same dance class as JonBenet. And if in fact those cigarette butts are similar to the type that were found near the home of both incidences, then I think DNA is something that they should pull. They need to spend the money. And that's on top of the unknown male DNA that nobody has been able to nail down yet. Okay. That is I think where the family is pressing the authorities to test that. So we'll see what the results are going to be. And whatever the results are, that's what it is. And that's what we have to, here in the true crime community, as well as in society, have to say, okay, either we had it right or we had it wrong. But either way, justice needs to be done. And on the other side of that justice, though, we're forgetting the principle of mercy. Until the truth is revealed, whatever that is, then we have to be merciful. And we have to look at these things objectively, not because, we got a gut feeling or this or that, okay? We have to stay objective. And so that's a good thing. So this is page 11, but remember last night where we left off about the amount. Patsy said that that amount had no significance to her. Patsy asked me why the author of the note had not asked for a larger sum of money, or at least a round sum of money. Patsy said the author of the note referred to John as being a Southerner. Now, this is where we left off there. And remember, it's important that we recognize this report was written on January 8th, 1997. So almost 10 days later. And so she is either hopefully taking from her notes, because she said she had to go back to the station and get her notebook. But I'm a little concerned, as I said last night, that some of the gaps are being filled in, recognizing that mistakes were made. And we would call that creative writing 101. I can't tell you how many times things have just happened on a crime scene, and you're like, uh-oh. And as a supervisor, you would say to the investigator or the detective or your patrol guy, how are you going to write that? Okay. And of course, it becomes creative writing 101. Because remember, everything in the law has to have a reason. There has to be reasonable suspicion and or probable cause that leads up to an outcome. Okay. So in this particular case, she thought it was important to say, she referred to John as, Patsy said, the author of the note referred to John as being a Southerner. She thought that was suspicious, and so she put it down. Patsy told me that anyone who knows John Ramsey knows he's not from the South. I asked Patsy when blank was next scheduled to be at their home. Blank was due to be at the Ramsey home at 0900 on Friday, December 27th, and that is going to be the housekeeper. That's going to be the housekeeper. While I was talking to Patsy, she would repeatedly start crying. I don't have a problem with that personally. If is it crocodile tears? What's the deal here? Okay. And let's talk about the scouts and the knots for a second. I see this going by. Okay. First of all, Burke would have been a Weeblo. He was 10 years old. He's not even into scouts yet. Scouts doesn't start until 11 years old as a tenderfoot. Now, I know that because there's an Eagle Scout plaque right across from me over here. Okay. So he wasn't learning how to tie knots, number one. Let's get that off the table from my perspective. Okay. He had just come from Cub Scouts. And at 10 years old, you were only learning, how to get little merit pins. Okay. And so a 10-year-old going down there, spending time with his sister to murder her because of whatever reason, and then, manufacture this garrote and then apply it 4 separate times while she's still alive, and then leave DNA through saliva, and then hit her with a golf club or whatever of force blunt trauma to the head, and then go upstairs and go to bed. Now, to me, that doesn't make sense. That's just, I don't know, call it 42 years in this business. I don't know. But that one doesn't make sense. So I think we need to, step away from that thought process right now, because if you stay in that lane, that's the lane you're going to be in. That's where you're going to be in. Okay? And that's the pretzel on the table from yesterday. It's not the potato chip. Let's stay with the bag of chips right now, right? So here the next scheduled date, or next scheduled to be at their home blank, was due to be at the Ramsey home at 0900. While I was talking to Patsy, she would repeatedly start crying. Patsy would be unable to speak. Patsy repeatedly asked, "Why didn't I hear my baby?" Isn't that self-loathing? Guilt of prevention? Why couldn't I have done something? Patsy looked physically exhausted. Now, when you doing a comparative analysis as to somebody who is faking it, and there are lots of them on the internet, you can see a difference. And what's interesting is this is real time that day. It's not a month later, 3 months later, 4 months later, 5 months later, where attorneys are involved. There's arguments going on between the police and the district attorney and the investigators. Everybody's fighting in this case, okay? Which is really very interesting for me because the folks that we deal with, like Dr. Picado, like others, here at the Cold Case Foundation, okay, we don't argue with each other. We don't fight with each other because it's not about us. It's about the child. Okay. But you had so many egos getting into the environment that, quite frankly, I hate to be critical, but I'm going to be honest. They screwed it up. There were so many mistakes made that, every time somebody did something, that was a suspicious activity. Okay. Well, again, I go back to yesterday and say, well, what would have happened if they would have got in there? The first responding officer said, your daughter's been kidnapped? Yes. Where's her bedroom? It's upstairs. Has anybody been in that bedroom? No. Okay. You have a note? Yeah, show me the note. Leave it there. Don't touch it. Where is it? Right here. Okay, what's it say? Oh, between 8 and 10 they're going to call? Yeah. Okay, great. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, Mr. Ramsey, who would like to stay in the house? I'll do that. Okay, fine, sir. Mrs. Ramsey, I need to get you out of the house. Anybody else in the house? Okay. I need to get you to some friends, some families, or whatever. Oh, we already called our friends. Okay, perfect. When they come over, they're not allowed in the house. We're going to get you into a safe place. Who's coming? The minister. Perfect. We'll meet you at the church. That will be a secondary area for us to control this environment. Okay, just in case. Okay, thank you. Boom, they're out. Now, think about that scenario right there. You have now him, you have an officer containing the scene, and that whole house is a crime scene. And it's at that point when a second officer gets there, if they're not already there, you can search the entire house without touching anything, looking for the child. You can go down in the basement, you can go up to the third floor, you can go into all the rooms. Okay, and you don't touch anything. You don't even touch the note. Here they had the evidence, folks, already there, dusting, throwing stuff around, and the call, the hypothetical call, hasn't even come in yet. And then they get there, 10 minutes late. So that's just my opinion. That's how I would have handled it, and I think that's how a lot of cops would have handled it. So he's 9. He's not even 11 yet. He's not even 10 yet. Okay. Burke. So yeah, again, if he's 9, then he's still a Cub Scout. So that said, when I talked briefly with John Ramsey during the morning of December 26, he was able to carry on a conversation and articulate his words. So she's doing a compare and contrast here. She's saying that mom was exhausted and was crying and asking for her why she didn't intervene with her baby. Why didn't I hear my baby? Okay. He closed her eyes and she was not able to rest. But Dad, she goes on to say, John Ramsey had smiled, joked, and seemed to focus during the conversation. Well, there's a whole other set of behavior going on here. The other behavior was the 118,000, I need to get the money. I'm waiting for a phone call. What are you guys doing? So there's a lot going on here with the dad. Patsy seemed to be much less focused when I spoke with her. Patsy seemed to have a far-off look in her expression. I'd like to know what that is. What's a far-off look? So that like a deer in the headlights? Patsy's thoughts were scattered, and it was difficult to get her to stay focused on one thought. Well, that's probably because her thought was her baby. And maybe she was medicated. I don't know. Patsy would collapse in tears and repeatedly ask why she had not been able to hear her baby. There were 2 phone calls received by John Ramsey when I saw him act differently than he had all morning. Now, she's saying that his behavior was consistent except for 2 separate times. Okay. You can't make this stuff up. This isn't an actual police report. Okay. And if we think about the brother, the little boy, he's got to get his sister down into the basement, keep her quiet, strangle her, hit her with a golf club, and then go back to bed. And then the family has to say, okay, well, wait a minute, Burke, did you kill her? Or what's going on here before we call 911 and have our lives destroyed by the world here for a moment? Well, Mom, yeah, I took her downstairs and I hit her with a golf club. Okay, John, we got to make this look like, we got to stage this whole event here. Okay, here's the plan. Nobody finds her, not even the cops, when we call 911. But when we do call 911, they're not going to find her because there's a little wooden, latch on the door. And that we just know that officer's not going to check that door looking for her. Okay. And we also know when, the other investigator gets here, John, you're going to look different than me. I'm going to fall apart. I'm not going to be able to talk. And you at the same time, okay, you just look like everything's cool. And you're going to get this crazy amount of money, $118,000. Okay, we got a deal. And oh, by the way, Burke, you keep your mouth shut. You're 9 years old and you just whacked your sister. That's the plan. Everybody got it? Yeah, okay, go. Oh, wait a minute. We forgot about the unknown DNA. We forgot about the manufacturing of the garrote. We forgot about the the paintbrush being utilized into her body. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along, right? The old saying. Nothing to see here. Keep moving. I mean, I've been at, traffic accidents where cars are cut in half and people pull up and they go, "Is that an accident, officer?" And you just go, "Have a good night, sir. Nothing to see here. Move along." So she says, 2 phone calls received by John Ramsey when I saw him act differently than he had all morning. When he received each of these phone calls, John stood in front of the north door located between the den and the kitchen. John looked outside during the phone call. John told the caller that JonBenet had been kidnapped. John was sobbing and had difficulty speaking. At times, John was unable to speak. I was told by friends the identity of the 2 callers. One caller was John Ramsey's son, John Andrew Ramsey. Well, if it was so suspicious, why didn't you just walk right up to Mr. Ramsey and say, "May I ask who you were speaking with?" Instead, she's so intent in catching him that she asked the friends. But she is also specific to say he was standing between the den and the kitchen in front of the north door. So she thinks it's important to put in there, Mr. Ramsey standing by the north door between the den and the kitchen. He's on a strange phone call with two people, two separate calls. Rather than going up to, as an investigator, going up to Mr. Ramsey and saying, sir, I noticed you took two phone calls. May I ask who that was? No, she goes to the friends and say, well, so who was John talking to? How do they know? Now, she got lucky that they did know because John probably told them, oh, that was Andrew and Melinda. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, now that we know, when the cops come and ask us, we'll know what to say. Remember that part where Rick Moranis in Spaceballs, and he says ludicrous speed, and all of the golf ball head guys go ludicrous speed, and he flies and he, hits the front of the spaceship. This is ludicrous speed at that moment, and you're going to hit the Mr. Coffee machine. Okay. John Ramsey told me that his Boulder family was planning on flying to Michigan this morning, meaning that's right, real time, this morning. Okay. John's adult children from another marriage, John, Andrew, and Melinda, had taken the family's private plane from Atlanta and had flown to Minneapolis, Minnesota. John Ramsey, Patsy, JonBenet, and Burke were going to fly to Minneapolis and meet with John and Melinda. Has that ever been unproven in any way, shape, or form? Because if it hasn't been, then that's a truthful statement. And that means this whole event, i.e., the inside family connection to whack JonBenet, would have taken her out of this already pre-planned event. Okay? The six Ramseys were then going to fly to their summer home located in, I forgot how to pronounce that. Anyway, Michigan. They were going to return to Boulder on Sunday, December 29th. And I've been there many times. At approximately noon, I paged Detective Sergeant Mason and asked that he phone me at the cellular phone number for one of the phones at the Ramsey's house. Patsy Ramsey had been repeatedly asking me for an update. That is not. What is suspicious about that? At approximately 12:30, I again paged Detective Mason and asked him to phone me. I did not receive a call from either of these pages. So at 12 and 12:30, she's trying to get hold of somebody in the department. At approximately 12:30, I noticed that John Ramsey seemed to be by himself. What does seem to be mean? Either he was or he wasn't. Okay. John Ramsey was alone, so he was by himself in the formal dining room area of the house. So he didn't seem to be, by himself. he was alone by himself in the living room. John Ramsey seemed to isolate himself from others. So her interpretation of being alone in the living room as a father who's waiting for a phone call, allegedly, as a father whose child has not been discovered, allegedly, he seems to be isolated by himself away from everybody else. Yet there are a bunch of people still in this house. And she's saying that he made a conscious, it sounds like she's inferring he made a conscious decision. John Ramsey seemed to isolate himself from others, i.e., he made the decision to isolate themselves or himself. Earlier in the morning, I noticed that when John, so again, she reflects back. I noticed that when John Ramsey was sitting down, he would look down and his legs would be bouncing. Okay, if we're looking for leakage here, is that because that's what they call that? Stress leakage? Okay. You're going to have that when you're in that house. That's going to be a given. Okay. It's a no-brainer. At any unknown time between 12:30, you notice she doesn't know specifics here. There's a lot of unknowns here. There's a lot of approximates. There's a lot of it seems. You seeing a theme here? At an unknown time between 12:30 and 1300, a half hour basically, 30 minutes, I talked with blank and blank. Well, why didn't you write it down in your notebook? What time you talked to them? That is your job. I told blank that I needed his help to keep John Ramsey's mind occupied. So she believes that he is occupied internally in his thought process with something. Could it be not illegal? I don't get it. I suggested to blank, and this is going to be the friend. So again, she goes to the friend and she, paints herself as the helper. I told blank that I needed his help to keep John Ramsey's mind occupied. I suggested to blank that he and John Ramsey check the house from top to bottom, excluding JonBenet's bedroom. Now, I don't know about you, but if a child is taken out of that bedroom and down a set of stairs or out the front door or out the back door or up the chimney, that whole house is a crime scene. And here, the suggestion is, I need to keep John's mind occupied. Well, it looks like he was occupied based on what you were just saying. His legs are bouncing up and down. He's thinking about something. If there's guilty knowledge there, you let him be. Let him run. Look at Stephen Stearns in the Soto case. Excuse me real fast. I'm going to take a sip of water. You see that guy in the background, and I did a video on it where he's leaning over telling all the friends, all the people there that, this is where I last dropped her off. This is where I saw her. And, you see all of this leakage because that's what that's called. It's leakage of stress. Okay. All of that, and that also could be trauma. People collapse. They fall. They lose their ability to stand up. I've had mothers, who I've had to do death notifications that just fall and collapse. They don't even know what you said. They only heard your child is dead or deceased. You don't use that word dead. You say, I'm sorry, Mrs. So-and-so, but I have to inform you your son or daughter is deceased. And boom, it's like, forget it. They don't even know. And here she's saying, okay, well, I need to keep John's mind occupied. I have an idea. I'll get hold of one of the friends, the same friends that I asked earlier, well, what do you think about the note? Remember, it was this detective that planted that notion. She's the one that said to the friends, tell me what you think about this note. And what do you think about the amount? And one of the friends asked her, and she put it in her report, well, what do you think? I.e., you're the detective. I suggested to blank that he and John Ramsey check the house from top to bottom, excluding JonBenet's bedroom. I suggested to blank that John Ramsey check to see if anything belonging to JonBenet had been taken or left behind. All right, so we're into at least 1,230 hours here, or 1,300 hours. So she's been in there. The police have had this house from 6 a.m., 0600, if I remember. So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she decides, I have an idea. John, I'm going to keep you busy, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to go to your friend. Hey, Mr. So-and-so, yeah, here's the plan. Yeah, I need to keep John occupied. Why don't you take him around the house, top to bottom, and see if there's anything out of place that was taken or left behind that belonged to JonBenet. Now, again, this is as bad as tearing down the house at 11:22 in Koberger's case. The defense said, sure, we'll sign off. Where do we sign? So Blank told me that he had reported his daughter missing to the Boulder Police Department this past year. Blank had checked the house and found his daughter inside the house. Okay, that's a hint from the friend to the detective. My daughter went missing this last year, and we called you guys, and probably the dispatcher said, have you searched the house? Yes, I'm searching the house now. Okay. Blank said his daughter had been hiding. Well, yeah, that's SOP, standard operating procedure. That's the first thing you do. A dispatcher, a 911 dispatcher, and my dispatchers that listen to me out there, chime in here, say, okay, stay on the phone. What I want you to do is go into every closet, every door. I want you to look behind, under, any tables, any couches. any furniture, because kids, they like to hide. They like to play games. Okay. Don't panic. Stay on the phone with me. And you search the house with that family member. Then the cops get there, and the first thing the cops do is they say, okay, where did you look? Well, I looked over here, here, and there, and say, okay, wait right here. We're going to search again. And we're going to start all over. And you take the parents and you put them on the porch, because parents will disappear. They're anxious to find their child. But if you can't keep them where you need to know, and that's why she kept them, there's a hint, okay? But you should only keep one if the other one is, collapsing. And then you, as an officer, double, triple check the house. And when your partner shows up, you say, let's check it again. Okay. I have found many kids underneath beds, okay, hiding with, long, comforters covering them. I found a kid wrapped in a big pile of laundry in a laundry basket. It happens. But in this case, they got downstairs and there was a little wooden notch on the door that you had to turn. And because it went in, you were only looking for egress out. And that's what the officer said. And boom. What if that officer would have found that body right then and there at the moment, early on at 6 o'clock in the morning? Now you would have had a very small window. And this entire investigation would have taken an entire different route. I can assure you of that. Okay. But because there were some mess ups, it now, you're 6 hours into this, and you say, okay, you're the owner of the house, you're the dad here. Yeah, go ahead and go search your house again. He had reported his daughter missing. This is the friend. Blank had checked the house and found his daughter inside the house. Blank said his daughter had been hiding. Blank told me it was hard for him at that time not to be able to do anything. You see, the cops did it right. They told him, enough, stop, stand. And what does she do? She turns to John Ramsey. I then spoke to John Ramsey. I suggested to John Ramsey that he and Blank check the house from top to bottom. It's almost as if John Ramsey didn't exist, because she goes through the friends and then she approaches Mr. Ramsey. She goes through the friends and says, hey, why don't you and John go search the house? Well, why don't you go to Mr. Ramsey and say, Mr. Ramsey, have you searched the house? Yes, multiple times. Okay. You know what? Stay here. I'm going to search the house. In fact, Mr. So-and-so, can you sit next to him? Officer so-and-so, stay here with them in the living room. You checked French already? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to search the house top to bottom, because I'm the case agent. I'm the one who's here. I'm the juvenile detective here. Okay. Who knows what the outcome would have been? I suggested to John Ramsey that he and Blank check the house from top to bottom to see if anything belonged to JonBenet, belonging to JonBenet had been taken or had been left behind. I talked with John Ramsey in the kitchen of the house. After I had spoken to John, he immediately went to the basement door. I saw Blank following John Ramsey. Now, why does she point out that he immediately went to the basement door? Is that suspicious activity for her when she just said in the sentence above that, check the house from top to bottom? So if Mr. Ramsey wanted to start at the bottom and go to the top, What is that suspicious activity when you're being told basically go to the basement, to the top floor, go from the top floor to the basement? Either way, however Mr. Ramsey chose to do it, he went towards the basement first. I saw blank following John Ramsey. So now we have to say to ourselves, okay, Ramsey knows there's going to be his dead child down there. I've got my friend with me. I was really hoping the cops would have found her. But I guess I have to go and do this. Okay. I then returned to the den area. She went back to the den. The time was approximately 1300 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At approximately 1301, I received a page to phone BPD number. There was no answer. I had tried to make this call using one of the cellular phones at the house. I then returned to the den. At approximately 1305, I saw blank run from the area of the basement door to the den. So she's in the den trying to make a phone call to the PD. She doesn't get an answer. She's using one of the cell phones. She goes back to the den, and approximately 4 minutes later, so this is a 4-minute search now down into this basement, I saw blank run from the area of the basement door to the den. I heard some type of shout or scream before I saw blank. I saw blank grab the phone in the den, dial 2 to 3 numbers, then hung up the phone. So he's in shock. And is she inferring he tried to dial 911? If that's the case, then they're seeing her as useless because she is the police. Blank then ran back towards the basement door. Blank yelled for someone to call an ambulance. So basically, she sees this activity of this guy running to the phone, pressing a couple numbers, and then running back down and yelling, "Somebody call an ambulance." Why didn't he run up to her and say, whatever? Blank yelled for someone to call an ambulance. I followed blank to the basement door. The door to the basement was wide open. I was standing in the hallway facing the door to the basement when I saw John Ramsey coming up the final 3 or 4 stairs. John was carrying a young girl in his arms. The young girl had long blonde hair. John Ramsey was carrying the young girl in front of him, using both of his arms to hold her around her waist area. The young girl's head was above John Ramsey's head while he was carrying her. From a distance of approximately 3 feet, as John was walking up the stairs, I was able to make the following observations to this young girl. Both of her arms were raised above her head and were motionless. Her lips appeared to be blue, which is consistent with strangulation. Her body appeared to have rigor mortis. That means you have a time frame that's taken place. There was a white string attached to her right wrist. There was a bright red mark, approximately the size of a quarter, at the front of her neck. That's going to be an abrasion consistent with asphyxiation and strangulation, i.e. the utilization of the garrote. The lower portion of her neck and the right side of her face appeared to have livor mortis, i.e. staining. It was consistent with being in a position for quite some time, typically 4 to 6 hours. You'll get a full set. So this child's been deceased for quite some time, is what she's saying here, in her opinion. The question is that consistent? And what she should have done that very moment she saw him holding that child in this position. Well, I'll tell you here in a second. I told John to place the young girl's body on the rug just inside the front doorway. John did as he was instructed. The young girl was JonBenet. JonBenet appeared to have been dead for a period of time. Now, this child has rigor, and she's got she got livor mortis, she's got rigor, right? And her observation is dead. So what does she do? I touched JonBenet's neck in an attempt to locate any sign that she was alive. I.e., I cross-contaminated JonBenet's body. JonBenet's skin was cool to the touch. You think? This is Inspector Clouseau. I have to tell you that. Okay? I mean, this is ludicrous speed again. And by the way, it gets worse. It gets worse. There was dried mucus from one of JonBenet's nostrils, consistent with purge and strangulation. My face was within inches of JonBenet's face. Why is that relevant to this dead child? I detected an odor of decay. John Ramsey asked me if JonBenet was alive. I don't remember the specific words John Ramsey used, meaning the father's standing there going, is she alive? But the officer remembered him asking her if she was alive, but she doesn't recall the specific word. What do you mean she's dead? What are you talking about? Those are what we call spontaneous utterances. Any detective knows that. If a suspect is playing a role, every word counts. The minutia. It is a piece of the potato chip. Because remember, every action counted in her observations before the body was discovered and the report written after the body was discovered. Now that the body's discovered, she in her head is going back and saying, what looks suspicious to me? And she's applying her experience to suspicion of behavior. And guess what? She's checking this child that she has just described here as having rigor mortis and, liver. I mean, she's dead. The child is gone. I'm not trying to be, hardcore about this. I'm just trying to, if I was the case agent and I walked in and a patrol officer told me, yeah, I saw him coming up the stairs and I could tell that there was rigor, and I could also tell that liver livor mortis, set in, lividity, that, so I checked her. So let me get this right. Homicide 101, Police Academy 102. You're told when you find a dead body, you're told to go check it. And you know it's dead? Okay. Can you show me where you learned that, please? Because we got to get you retrained. Okay. So here she is saying, oh, and by the way, I went face to face. I could see mucus and I could smell the odor. I detected an odor of decay. Okay. Well, the child's not going to start decomp that soon, number one. What she probably smelled was the defecation of the fluid starting to leave the body. And when the father moved the body, okay, that starts moving the fluids. And they start coming out of any kind of opening because the heart is stopped. John Ramsey asked me if JonBenet was alive. I don't remember the specific words John Ramsey used. I told John Ramsey that his daughter was dead. John Ramsey moaned. I told John Ramsey to go back to the den where the other persons in the house were congregated. So there's still people in the house. You notice it says, I told, I did, I remember. There's a lot of I's here. I told John to place the young girl bodies down. Okay. I don't remember the specific words. John Ramsey moans, I told John Ramsey to go back to the den. You'll notice if you've ever watched an interview, there's a lot of I that comes out of this. Okay. I know who killed JonBenet Ramsey. I know the families involved. I completely dismiss a stranger theory. I will write a book about it. I will sue a department about it. I know all the things that happened. Well, guess what? I've worked 300 murders in my career, plus, like I said, a couple hundred naturals, suicides, etc. I don't know what happened. Personally, I wasn't there. But I can tell you, I've been to a lot of homicide scenes, and I still don't know what happened until you talk to that suspect, and the suspect said, well, let me tell you what you're wrong about. And then you go, oh, roger that. And that leads us back to the garage again. Okay. John Ramsey moaned. I told John Ramsey to go back to the den where the other persons in the house were congregated. I told John Ramsey to phone 911 and have detectives and a coroner respond. Isn't she the police department? Isn't this her job? She's telling the father who just brought up this dead child, when you get a chance, go back in the den and call 911. Make sure they have detectives and the coroner respond. You can't make this stuff up. That's like saying to somebody who discovered their child committed suicide in the garage, hey, do me a favor. Yeah, here, take this knife and go in there and cut them down. And when you're done, make sure the coroner's notified. Are you serious? And people are running and saying this is suspicious activity by, whoever. I'm here to tell you, this is a total annihilation of proper police work. It embarrasses me to even read this. I think it would probably embarrass 1,000 people. Let's see. With all due respect, don't you have anything to defend the R's with aside from berating the detective who was stranded on that job? Sure. What do you want to hear, Just Josie? In all due respect. In all due respect, you want me to lie about this detective? Isn't that kind of an emotional response? Do you think this is proper protocol? And if so, point it out, put it in the chat, point it out to me. With all the experience that you have other than internet detective school. Show me how many bodies you've stood over and how many families you've notified that their children were dead. I'll wait. Hang on. Go ahead, I'm waiting. I'll even give you the clown horn. Okay. Back to the Inspector Clouseau. I told John Ramsey to phone 911 and have detectives and a coroner respond. You see, sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes the truth hurts. We can't think of the police making mistakes. I can, because I've made mistakes. Okay? And thank you very much right here. I have investigated several hundred homes in my career. Chris is 1,000% on point. And thank you, Devil Dog. This is a cluster. There's a word for it. It's right. FUBAR, fudged up beyond all recognition. Okay. These are facts. This is the officer is going to be put on the stand if this case gets solved. And a good defense attorney is going to say, so Mr. or Detective Clouseau, yeah, did you really ask Mr. Ramsey to call 911, ask for additional detectives and the coroner? Yes. Okay, and where in your policies and procedures does it tell you to do that? Or better yet, did you have a field training officer? Yes. Did you go to a police academy? Yes. Did you take classes on investigation? Yes. And you can just keep going down that lane. And then all they have to do is say, well, can you point out where you as a law enforcement officer tell the family who just discovered their dead child in the basement to call 911? And by the way, when you get a chance, request the coroner? Really? And by the way, did you lean down within inches of her face after knowing that she was already deceased? Because you described that she was already deceased. Can you tell us what lividity is? Can you tell us what rigor is? Can you give us the time frames? And how long does it take before that starts to set in? Because you put in here that the child was dead, right? Yeah. But you cross-contaminated that child by touching her, didn't you? And in fact, any of your hair, any of your touch DNA, anything that you brought into that house and that crime scene that day could have contaminated this body, couldn't it have? Yes. After John Ramsey left, I picked up JonBenet and carried her into the living room. It gets better. It gets better. Now, Detective Clouseau, yeah. You told him to put the body down, right? Why is that? Well, because the body shouldn't have been moved. Okay. But you thought it was a good idea when Mr. Ramsey left to pick up this deceased child and not leave her where you just told him to leave her. But you picked up the child and brought her into the living room where everybody was. Is that correct? I laid JonBenet on the rug located inside the living room. You can't make this up. And whoever was defending her, whoever it was, okay, what do you got to say about this one? This is like nutty. This is just totally off the rails here. Totally off the rails. Thank you, Daisy Rose. You're amazing. Okay, it's getting worse. Let me go through some of this. Thank you. This is a good, Robin, thank you so much. Buddy is going to be excited. And 46 months here. Thank you so much, Kat. We sure love and appreciate you. Thank you so very much, everybody. Get through these. Andy, Country Girl, love your comments too. Thank you. And our Amy, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna keep going here because you can't make this stuff up. Okay, we can't make this stuff up. I noticed that JonBenet was wearing. By the way, because picture this now, okay. Picture this just for a second. Okay. You have a child. She looks like this. And you've told the dad, put her down here in the hallway. Okay. So dad complies. And you say, okay, get out of here, go call 911. And while you're gone, I'm going to pick her up and I'm going to move her again. So now we have one crime scene in the basement cellar. You know what I've never seen? A lot of photographs about where she was laid down the first time after he came up the stairs with her. There are very few photographs, I bet, of that. That's a foobar too. Because there could be cross-contaminated evidence from a suspect and or the father or now Detective Clouseau, okay, on this child. So Clouseau takes it upon herself to say, I noticed JonBenet, or excuse me, let me go back to 12 here for a second. After John left, I picked up JonBenet and carried her into the living room. So she sees what we're looking at right here. Anybody who wants to defend this, in my opinion, don't ever go into law enforcement as a career. Ever. Because there is no critical thinking skill taking place if that's the case. Okay? You just stay at McDonald's, salt the fries. Not that that's a bad job. I worked, in fast food when I was younger. But just stay there as a career. Okay? Because you should not be moving dead bodies that you know are dead. Once you say to the father, she's dead. I laid JonBenet on the rug located inside the living room, i.e., I put her on additional fibers that could be cross-contaminated into her cotton or knit top. I figured it was a good idea to lay her on top of a rug, okay, because she had come from her bedroom out of a blanket down in the basement onto a floor in the hallway. I thought it was a good idea. There wasn't enough cross-contamination taking place. So I moved her again onto a rug into the living room because I noticed she was wearing white cotton pajama pants. She was also wearing a long sleeve white cotton or knit top. And her face was turned to the right side now, i.e., lividity, if you move the body again, you can still see the staining on the body, but we'll never know if she was killed in a different location based on these types of, meaning definitively, based on these types of descriptions. This is this detective's report, everybody. I don't have a dog in this fight. I am looking at this, as a professional saying, can it get any worse? And apparently it can, because this report keeps going. JonBenet was wearing a long sleeve white cotton or knit top. Okay. Her face was turned to the right side. There were no coverings on JonBenet's feet. JonBenet's feet appeared to be white, i.e., drained of color. Well, that happens when the heart stops. It does not circulate blood. And that's why, as you had described, you get lividity, because the blood settles at the lowest point. Sometimes in the heels, or it depends on how the feet were laid at the time of death. There's a call coming in. I did not notice any marks to her feet. Shortly after I had moved JonBenet into the living room, I heard a loud guttural moan and wail coming from the den area of the house. The noise sounded as though it was made by a woman. I have a plan. I'll move the body, into the living room. And that way, everybody that's in the house can fall apart. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, any other way. And I will make sure that's suspicious. Okay. Wow. John Ramsey came into the living room approximately 1 to 2 minutes after I had sent him back into the den. As John entered the room, he asked me if he could cover up JonBenet. John grabbed a throw blanket that was lying on a chair located immediately inside the living room. John placed this blanket over JonBenet's body before I had a chance to speak. You see, that's suspicious. Well, here's a hint, Clouseau. If you would have left the body where you told him to leave it and then kicked everybody out of the house, don't blame him for your incompetence. I hate to say it, but that's truth. John grabbed a throw blanket that was lying on a chair located immediately inside the living room. John placed this blanket over JonBenet's body before I had a chance to speak. So what does she do? Well, I'll just adjust the blanket. seeing how everybody else is, jumping in here, I think, what he did was before I could tell him don't do that, well, he already did it. So guess what? I might as well adjust the blanket. I adjusted the blanket on JonBenet's body so that her clothing was covered from her neck down. So basically, she again covers the body, leaving the head exposed, i.e. the most grotesque part of the deceased body during a strangulation, okay, so that everybody can, break down, have an emotional breakdown. I adjust the blanket on JonBenet's body so that her clothing was covered from her neck down. And at the same time, she didn't put this in there, I transferred all the hair, all the dog hair, all the fibers, everything from that blanket onto her sweater and pajamas, just in case. I also covered the neck area of JonBenet. I had covered the wound on JonBenet's neck with her long sleeve shirt before John Ramsey arrived in the living room. So she covers the wound. Before John even gets in there, she's already taken it upon herself to pick her up, move her into the living room, put her down, and start adding more cross-contamination. Maybe she should be investigated. I don't know. Sure is weird. Camel Blues are not a common smoke detector, but I want to know who sells them, who buys them. Who knew who left the cigarette butts in latrine that way? Yeah, that's a great question. And guess what, Willie? In the other incident with the other child who goes to JonBenet's dance class with her, there were also Camel Blue butts, cigarette butts, outside of the window area or the house of that other attack. Interesting stuff for sure. Okay. I told John Ramsey that he could say goodbye to his daughter, but he could not move her body. She should say, like me, touch her hands or lower the blanket. John knelt on the floor next to JonBenet. John repeatedly referred to JonBenet as my little angel. John stroked her hair with one of his hands. Cross-contamination. Additional. The fact that he picked her up, carried her up the stair, cross-contamination. John Ramsey laid down next to JonBenet, placed an arm around her body. Well, why not pick her up? And made sounds as though he was crying. Was he crying or making sounds like he was crying? And why is he still in the house? Why is anybody in the house? You had the authority and have the authority to kick them out of the house. You can't make this stuff up. I did not notice any tears. Remember, this is post-discovery. He placed his arm around her body and made sounds as though he was crying. I did not notice any tears. John Ramsey then rolled away from JonBenet's body and went into a kneeling position. When John rolled away from JonBenet's body, he looked around toward the hallway. John Ramsey then knelt by JonBenet's body. Well, he was already kneeling, according to this. He says, she goes, I did not notice any tears. John Ramsey then rolled away from JonBenet's body and went into a kneeling position. Okay, so he's in a kneeling position in this sentence. When John rolled away from JonBenet's body, he looked around towards the hallway. John Ramsey then knelt by JonBenet's body. He was already in a kneeling position. Hugged her and called her his little angel. After approximately 5 to 10 seconds, John stood up, stopped hugging JonBenet, and again looked towards the hallway. John remained kneeling near JonBenet when I looked into the hallway towards the den. I was able to watch JonBenet, John Ramsey, and the people coming from the den towards the living room. I saw Patsy Ramsey. It seems as though Patsy was unable to walk without the assistance of someone on each side of her holding her up. Okay, I'm trying to figure out where she's going here with, the fact that she's writing a play here. And this is creative writing 101 because, she's got John kneeling next to the child and looking down the hallway, hugging the child, looking down the hallway. And lo and behold, when she looks down the hallway, she sees people coming towards her, holding Patsy, whose baby is dead on the floor, and you can only see the grotesque part of the strangulation from her head because she still has that, noose around her neck, and it's cut the blood off. You can clearly see it in the autopsy photos. Imagine a cop sitting there with this dead child that you've just moved into a place where everybody, come on in, come on. Hey, who's out there? Get the Amazon guy, bring him in. Come on, let's go. Everybody, get him in here. Somebody hold up the mother. Okay. This is ludicrous. This is ludicrous speed. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. It seems as though Patsy was unable to walk without the assistance of each side of her holding her up. Blank, Patsy, blank, 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 and blank all came into the living room area. By this time, again, not one time is she indicate time out. Everybody out. Let's go. Come on. Out. Let's go. Move it. Police. This is a crime scene. It should have started the moment they hit that house at 6 o'clock in the morning. And here we are at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's getting worse. Okay? Nobody's talking about the mistakes the cops made. I'm sorry. I'm going to be honest. If this was my department, I would say it the exact same way. Those of you who know me and have worked with me know I'm not, I'm not bashful when it comes down to saying, you know what, we should have done a better job. We should have done a better job. Let's see here. DC, thank you for being here. Please listen. The unidentified male profile from under the door matches the unknown male DNA profile from the Long Johns. Tested over a decade apart. Same profile. You know what? That is going to be really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your kindness and your contribution. I hope you've subscribed to my channel. Our channel. My sweetheart. As I faced JonBenet this is where she goes into holding her body. She immediately went to her and laid on top of her. Oh my gosh. But what's crazy about this is, okay, it's, I don't know how, I've seen a lot of stuff in my time. I've experienced a lot of stuff in my time. You have experienced stuff in your time. Some of you have lost family members. Some of you have been victims of violent crimes. Some of you have lost family members of victims, who have been victims of violent crime. I think the number one complaint we used to get was the cops wouldn't let me in and they didn't tell me anything. Okay? That is like the number one complaint people complain in, violent situations, because they want to be there with their loved ones and the police say, nope, no way, I'm sorry, and then, they try to sneak around and you shut them off. You can't let them in. In this case, think about this. This is 1996. Okay, we're not in the dark ages here. Okay. There are a lot of protocols that law enforcement follows. Here's the problem. She was a juvenile detective. Okay? I can tell you, she had very rare, if any, homicide experience ever. Okay. It's like putting somebody into an 18-wheeler and saying, yeah, just drive through that car wash over there. The truck will fit. Don't worry. Okay. She is way over her head. And the problem here is she won't admit it. In fact, she fought the department. She took the department to federal court and she lost. Okay. That said, as I faced JonBenet from the hallway again, John Ramsey was to the right of her body. Blank was near JonBenet's head. Patsy Ramsey was next to Blank. Blank was next to Patsy, near JonBenet's feet, and Blank and Blank and Blank were also near the lower portion of JonBenet's body. What the heck were they doing there? Period. Blankety, blankety, blank. What was Blank doing there? In any way, shape, or form. I don't care where they're positioned, because every blank in here needs to now be eliminated. As a person, I'm not angry. I'm not angry. I'm frustrated with the incompetence. But thank you for pointing that out. You'll know when I'm angry. Trust me. It takes a lot to get me angry. But I do like you pointing that out, that I am frustrated. There's no question about it, and thank you. Okay. But what are they doing there? That's my question. That's my frustration. Why are they there? They should have been out of that house. We're also near the lower portion of JonBenet's body. Blank left the living room and went into the kitchen. Blank seemed to be very upset. So they're letting everybody know that there's a ligature problem here, and they can all hang out with the body, and they can get up and come and go. And when she left, she notes that, yeah, Judy this is hypothetical, so-and-so felt that she was over her head. She was very, very upset, very emotional. When Blank entered the living room, she was shaking and her eyes were wide. Did you guys see the thumbnail from yesterday? Blank grabbed onto my arms and repeatedly told me not to leave. Don't leave. Meaning, what? What is this? You would have left the body in the hallway. You could have hustled everybody out of the house, and none of this post-mortem behavior would be occurring. Zero. This wouldn't even be in the report because it wouldn't have happened. Just saying. I asked Blank to pray for JonBenet and to lead everyone in a prayer. Well, this isn't the time you're raising Lazarus here. Okay. This is an active crime scene. I then stood near the piano in the living room and was able to watch everyone in the room. I have a plan. Yeah. I'll get everybody to start praying and I'll sit back and watch them. Okay. You can't make this stuff up. Can you imagine this in a movie script, playing this out? Can you imagine what the trial will be if that DNA comes back to a hit on a suspect? I will attend this trial personally, okay, because it's going to be interesting for sure. I mean, here she's saying, okay, I have an idea. Yeah, let's say a prayer. Okay, now what if somebody, and we don't see it here, but what if somebody had said, okay, are you going to watch us while we pray? Yeah, that's my plan. Okay, everybody ready? Let's pray. Okay. I then stood near the piano because remember, she said, I asked blank to pray for JonBenet and to lead everyone in a prayer except me. I don't want to participate. I want to stand back by the piano and I want to watch everybody so I can later put it down as suspicious behaviors that I saw. I saw John open one eye during the prayer. I saw Patsy not open any eyes. I saw the neighbors blinking while they were praying. Okay. That's how ludicrous this is. In the living room, and was able to watch everyone in the living room as well as blank, who was still in the kitchen area. Patsy was crying and moaning while she was with JonBenet. Patsy raised herself onto her knees, lifted her arms straight into the air and prayed. Patsy said, Jesus, you raised Lazarus from the dead, raised my baby from the dead. At approximately 12 hours, there had been no officer response. Didn't anybody call 911 like they were instructed to? And said, hey, you got Inspector Clouseau over here is moving a dead body. And when you get a chance, she's asked me to make sure the coroner's en route too. Okay. Didn't she pick up her radio in like the first paragraph? She went to the department, got her notebook and radio. I guess it didn't work. Okay. And she's got two of these cell phones, okay? And instead of saying to everybody out of the house, let's go, I'm going with you, I'm going to stand outside, okay? And they stand outside, and you either get cell service, because back then you had what you called the brick. Remember the brick? Okay. But she had two phones, okay? But she's telling, the dad, make sure you go call 911 and get the coroner en route. Unbelievable. There had also been no response from the coroner or an ambulance. You think? There had also been no response from the coroner or the ambulance. The closest phone was a cellular phone in the kitchen. This phone was located approximately 12 feet away. I quickly walked into the kitchen, grabbed the cell phone. It's like this, they're holding me hostage here. They're praying for Lazarus. I've instructed them to do that, but I'm trapped. I'm trapped. I see a phone 12 feet away. It's my time, my moment to make my move. And I make the move. I grab the cell phone. I quickly walked into the kitchen, grabbed the cell phone, and returned to the area in the hallway, right outside the living room. I phoned 911. I reached dispatcher Santiago. I told the dispatcher that I needed a detective response. Isn't she a detective? And didn't she get called out to be there? I don't know, checking for Boulder. I told the dispatcher that I need a detective response and a coroner at my location. I identified myself by my radio number, 156. Hey, this is 156. I need a detective here and bring a coroner. Within approximately 3 to 5 minutes of this 911 call, I made a second 911 phone call. I again reached a dispatcher whose voice I did not recognize. She recognized Santiago, but she gets a second dispatcher because I guess she felt within 3 to 5 minutes Santiago didn't do anything. I was transferred to a supervisor. I informed the male supervisor that I needed detective response, the coroner, and an ambulance at my present location. Why do you need an ambulance? You have a homicide scene. I gave my location. They didn't know where you were when you called out, when you got a call out and you went on the radio and told dispatch, I'm 1097 at 755 15th Street. She's kind of throwing the dispatch under the bus here too. Seems to be projecting a lot of behavior away from herself. You know, the dad didn't make the first 911 call. She makes a second 911 call. What did the dad do? Did he call 911 when she told him to and get the coroner going? Apparently some time had gone by and she had to make her move for the phone. And then 3 to 5 minutes later, she makes a call and then she makes another one. So that's a third 911 call. Didn't she really know where she was? Didn't she know? Didn't they know that she's unit 156 out at 755? Check your CAD. I've been out here for 4 hours. I told the dispatcher that I was at the scene of a homicide. Prior to making the second 911 call, I had seen an ambulance drive slowly northbound on 15 past the Ramsey residence. So she recognizes an ambulance going by while the whole family is gathering around the child that she brings up and puts into the living room. At approximately 1320 or 1325 hours, Officer Weiss arrives at the Ramsey residence. Officer Weiss had responded to the first floor north door located off the caterer's kitchen. Officer Weiss had been calling out my name. Are you in there? Are you still here? I briefly met with Officer Weiss, leaving everybody in the living room, apparently, and then returned to the hallway outside the living room. I informed Weiss of the current situation. Okay, here's the deal. Yeah. The dad comes walking up the stairs. I catch him at the last 3 stairs. He's holding this kid. It's obvious the child's dead. So I tell him, put the child down into the hallway. The other guy is running around. He's just kind of lost it, who was with the father. Okay, and then what happened? Well, I told the dad, get in there, make a phone call 911, get the coroner en route here. Okay, and then what happened? Well, then I picked the kid up and I brought the kid into the living room. All right, and then what happened? Well, at that point, the dad kind of fell over the kid with a blanket, put a blanket over him. So I decided, that's a good idea. So I adjusted the blanket so that just her head could be seen. And that way, when the father collapsed on her, that would be fine. And then I see this mob of people walking the mother down the hallway, and they all collapse around her. Next thing you know they're all praying for Lazarus, to be risen from the dead. And it's at that moment I made my move for the, 12 feet away to grab the cell phone. Okay. Guess what? That narrative that I just gave you, you can't make that up. You cannot make that up. I bet you it wasn't told to the grand jury like that. I'll put money on it. Drive slowly northbound past the Ramsey residence. At approximately 12:30 or 13:20, 1:20, or 13:25, Officer Barry Weiss arrived at the residence, blah, blah, blah. Weiss then returned to the hallway. At an unknown time, again, unknown times. There seems to be a theme here. After JonBenet's body was found and prior to Officer Weiss' arrival, I instructed blank to stand guard in front of the basement door. I told blank that no one was to enter the basement area. Who's blank that is taking a police role? The defense will have a field day. I instructed blank to stand guard in front of the basement door. I told blank that no one was to enter the basement area. After Officer Weiss arrived, I met with the following BPD officers. Watch 1 Sergeant, whoever, all these names, blah, blah, blah. Ron Walker with the FBI had accompanied Sergeant Mason. Paramedics from AMR Ambulance, American Ambulance, I remember that company, also arrived. After Officer Wise arrived, I had requested that an ambulance respond. For what? Okay, for checking the health of everybody. Okay, fine. Patsy Ramsey appeared to be swooning, and I was concerned for her health. So basically, she's watching a visceral response from a mother who's been hugging her dead child in full rigor in the living room. That makes sense, actually. You better get her, medical care. The paramedics did not examine, I was concerned for her health. The paramedics did not physically check Patsy Ramsey. The paramedics did not examine nor touch JonBenet. I was told that Patsy Ramsey was obviously very distraught. However, she physically did not need to have medical attention. The 2 paramedics cleared the scene after Patsy was checked. So here she says they didn't check her. Paramedics did physically check Patsy Ramsey. The paramedics did not examine nor touch JonBenet. I was told that Patsy Ramsey was obviously distraught. However, she physically did not need to have medical attention. The 2 paramedics cleared the scene after Patsy was checked. Okay, 10-8. All units cleared. At 13:15, I received a page from communications, i.e. dispatch. The page stated Sergeant Kisera was at the front door. Let me get this right. Yeah. Hey, where's Sergeant K? I don't know. Page him. Hey, where are you? I'm at the front door. Oh. Okay. I can't find you. Well, we've been in the house since 6 a.m. Sergeant K was unable to find me. I also received a page on my pager at approximately 13:29, which is about 14 minutes later. The page stated that my cellular 911 call had been received by Weld County. Weld County Communications did not understand me. I was instructed to call Boulder Communications Center if I needed assistance. Okay, a 7,000 square foot house, fine. But the living room's in the front. It's not rocket science. And if you've already been there since 6 a.m, the size of the square footage of the house is irrelevant. Okay. But so now this experienced detective who's been working this area forever calls 911 and doesn't say, hey, I'm with Boulder County. Can you patch me over to my dispatch? Why? What's going on? I've got a cluster over here. I got a dead body. I need the coroner. Okay, I'll stay on the line. But here, apparently somebody left a message because they called her back. Right? They called her back and said, hey, we didn't understand what you were talking about. And by the way, you should have called Boulder Communications if you needed assistance. That's who you work for. After the officers arrived, everyone was cleared out of the living room. JonBenet's body was left where I had placed her. At approximately 1340 hours, Detective Bill Palmer told me he overheard a phone conversation made by John Ramsey. John Ramsey was making arrangements to fly to Atlanta either that afternoon or that evening. Arrangements were made for John and Patsy Ramsey, blank and blank, blank and blank, to go to the blank residence. The blank lives at blank in Boulder. At approximately 1400 hours, I received a page to phone Detective Patterson. So at 2 o'clock, I phoned Patterson using one of the cell phones in the kitchen. Apparently it works. Detective Patterson told me that he was going to attempt to contact and interview Burke Ramsey. Detective Patterson asked where Burke was staying. I informed Patterson Burke was at the blank residence located at blank in Boulder. Blank family members were watching Burke. One of the family members of the house was blank. I cleared the residence at approximately 1435. The Ramsey residence was vacated after John and Patsy Ramsey and their friends had left the residence. Officers cleared the residence and awaited a search warrant before returning. John Ramsey had been wearing a khaki pants and blue and white long sleeve striped shirt when I had last seen him. They didn't collect the clothing, it sounds like, even though she let him carry the kid, hug the kid, do whatever. They should have grabbed it right then and there. Patsy Ramsey had been wearing black pants and a red turtleneck sweatshirt. Maybe this is where the red turtleneck sweatshirt comes in and why the confusion with the father. There had been a paper bag containing children's clothing, which was sitting in the doorway to the den throughout most of the morning. After approximately 11 a.m., I moved the bag to the cloakroom area, which is located next to the door leading into the garage. Blank told me the clothing contained outer clothing for JonBenet and Burke. Winter ski pants, 2 winter jackets, boots have been contained within this bag. Blank removed these items and placed them in the cloakroom area. When I had asked about the doors being locked in the house, John Ramsey told me, now this is post, remember, she's now filling in the blanks. Okay. When I had asked about the doors being locked in the house, John Ramsey told me the door leading from the garage into the house is always left unlocked. John further told me that the garage area is always secured from the outside. Before Officer Weiss left the residence in the morning of the 26th, I believe he opened the door leading from the house into the garage area. I briefly saw a utility vehicle and a car. Officer Weiss told me the car was a Jaguar. After I cleared the Ramsey residence, I returned to the Boulder Police Department. I met with Detective James Byfield and assisted him in completing a search warrant for the Ramsey residence. I also attended a general detective briefing. When John Ramsey met with me in the living room after JonBenet's body has been found, I asked him where he'd found JonBenet. John Ramsey told me JonBenet had been lying in the wine cellar. John Ramsey told me JonBenet had been lying underneath a blanket. John told me that JonBenet's arms had been tied. JonBenet had a piece of tape covering her mouth. John told me he removed the tape from JonBenet's mouth. John said he then grabbed JonBenet and carried her upstairs. One of the first things John told me after he came into the living room and had covered JonBenet's body was he didn't cover her body. Let's not forget that. We just read that he asked for permission and she allowed him to do it. Had covered JonBenet's body. It has to be an inside job. Yeah. The victim risk continuum will tell us that. Yep. John told me I was right. It had to be someone who knew the family. He's right. Correct. The victim risk continuum tells us that. John told me that no one knows about the wine cellar in the basement, and therefore it has to be an inside job. So French briefly talked with me at the Ramsey residence after JonBenet's body had been found. French asked where JonBenet's body had been discovered. I told Officer French that John Ramsey said John had been found in the wine cellar in the basement. Officer French asked me to describe this room. I had not been downstairs and could not describe it. Officer French told me that when he did check the house, he checked the basement area. Officer French had not checked behind one door in the basement. This door had a latch on the top frame of the door. The door was latched. I briefly talked with him, with blank, after officers arrived at the Ramsey residence, after JonBenet's body had been found. I asked blank where he was when JonBenet's body was found. Blank told me he was a few steps behind John Ramsey. John Ramsey had entered the wine cellar room located in the basement of the house. Blank was not able to see inside the room because his vision was blocked by the door. Blank heard John Ramsey cry out. I obtained the following information from the General Detective briefing held on the late afternoon of December 26th. All right, what are we doing on time here? 2 hours. What page am I on? 16. All right. Again, French said, I should have gone into the room. I didn't check it. Okay. The father who lives in the house opened the door, finds his dead daughter. He's got his friend with him after being told, search the entire house, top to bottom. Instead of being out of the house and the cops going back in and searching it again. Okay, because the phone call hadn't come in. So now, the level of suspicion's going, okay, well, why isn't this person calling? Are they surveilling us? What's going on here? Okay. Detective Patterson had conducted an interview with Burke Ramsey. Burke Ramsey said he and 3 other members of his family had attended a party held at the blank residence on December 25th, 1996. The Ramseys were at the dinner party from approximately 1630 until 2100 to 2130. Crab was served at this dinner. Did they find any crab in JonBenet's stomach? I know they found pineapple because that's a big deal. Did they find crab in the coroner's report? Crab was served at the dinner. John and Patsy Ramsey disciplined each of their children by talking to them. John and Patsy Ramsey do not use any corporal punishment on their children. Burke said there had been no family arguments prior to nor on December 25th. Imagine talking to a 9-year-old just after Santa Claus showing up. Eiler talked with the house guest who were staying at Blank's home. The house guest told Detective Eiler that John and Patsy Ramsey treat each of their children fairly. One of the house guests did say that Patsy adored JonBenet. Detective Eiler was told that an adult daughter of John Ramsey's from a previous marriage had been killed in a car accident approximately 5 years ago. Detective Adler had also been told that Patsy Ramsey had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Patsy had recovered from the cancer approximately 2 years ago. Detective Eiler was told that John and Patsy Ramsey had held a Christmas party at their house on December 23rd. Extra caterers had been hired to assist with this party. Flag it. John Ramsey had told me that he and Patsy had hosted a Christmas party at their home for their children's friends. I thought John Ramsey told me this open house had been held on December 24th. So he's not sure if he's got it wrong or if Ramsey's got it wrong. The children who attended the party had decorated gingerbread houses. The gingerbread houses decorated by JonBenet and by Burke had been sitting on the dining room table located just south of the kitchen in the Ramsey residence. John Ramsey told me this information after I had asked him about those gingerbread houses. Blank had also talked with me about the gingerbread houses. Blank had told me that Patsy Ramsey was the only woman she knew or she know who would allow young children to decorate their own gingerbread houses. Blank children, blank and blank, had also attended this Christmas gathering. Detective Eidler had spoken with blank and blank. Blank told Detective Eidler that he had searched the Ramsey house after he had arrived at the Ramsey residence earlier this morning. Blank said he had opened the door to the wine cellar. Blank was unable to locate a light switch for the wine cellar. Blank did not enter the wine cellar. Blank had said the interior of the wine cellar was dark and he did not see anything inside. Detective Eiler had spoken with Blank. Blank told Detective Eiler that he had searched the Ramsey house after he arrived at the Ramsey residence early this morning. Okay. So he didn't find the body as well. Had said the interior of the wine cellar was dark, blah, blah, blah. Blank said the latch to the wine cellar located at the top of the door was secured when he checked it. Blank resecured the latch to the wine cellar after he closed the door. Now, this is a citizen, I'm assuming. Okay? And if that's the case, the citizen had enough common sense to open the wine cellar door and check. And the officers didn't. I don't know. That's a red flag. Thank you, Amy, so much. Do any of you think that's weird? I don't know. I think that's like strange. Thanks for the snacks for Buddy. So kind of you. I pounded that one for quite some time. The search warrant prepared by Detective Byfield was signed by Boulder County Judge Diane McDonald in the early evening of December 26. I was notified that the search warrant had been signed at approximately 8 o'clock. I responded to back to the Ramsey residence. Detective Harttop and I used crime scene tape and secured the exterior of the property residence with this tape. That is 14 hours after they secured the scene with crime scene tape, 14 hours after the first officer on the scene, 14 hours. And let's see here, 7 hours after the body had been discovered. I'll leave that right there. The crime scene tape was placed along the southeast and north borders of the Ramsey property. Useless trivia. The crime scene tape, because the photographs will show that. The crime scene tape was that she's filling in gaps. This is creative writing 101. Okay. That's why you take photographs. Okay. And by the way, you got to start all over now. because the earlier photographs that they took, that, you know, you should be glad you got them, but now you got to start from the outside in one more time. With the crime scene tape up, with a crime scene log started, with everything that's has been going on, you got to photograph everybody's clothing. You got to take clothing, put people in paper suits, or have them bring a change of clothing. You have to secure, you know, the whole place. Again, you don't do it hours and hours later. Again, this is incompetence in its finest hour, in my opinion. Thank you, Barb. You're a saint. Okay. In my opinion, this is, again, you can't make this stuff up. You just cannot make this stuff up. And this is, I guess, you know, for me, just looking at this thing objectively, you know, going back over this and reading these reports, I see so much on you know, social media and just through the media as a whole for years and years and years. They've just been pounding and pounding and pounding about a few things. You know, the apple or the pineapple, the note, okay, you know, Burke and the train track, and, you know, Burke did it, Dad did it, Mom did it. You know, the note was written by Mom. You have variants of opinions, you know, from experts. You know, even the Secret Service said no, she didn't. Okay, but then you have interpretations of the note. Okay, but you know, I try to keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS. You know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I also haven't fallen off of a turnip truck. And this is the first place you start. You don't start with the, you know, the pretzel when you have a bag of chips. And until you can put the bag of chips together, i.e., why did the suspect choose a garrote? How did the suspect conceal this body for as long as they did? How much time did they have within inside of that house? What was the reasonable time of death? Okay. Why did the officers, when they first responded, not find her? Why did the lead detective decide, okay, put her down, I'll carry her up here and I'll cross, you know, did they take the detective's clothes? Because if I was the lead detective, I would have said, hey, I need to tell you something. What's that? I need your clothes. Go home, or, you know, we're going to put you in a paper suit. Well, why are you going to do that? You pick the kid up. Here's a call coming in. The dead body that you said was dead, you picked it up and carried it into the living room. And then you had a seance around it. And you observed it over by the piano. Okay. This officer will be destroyed on the stand by, can you imagine if Ann Taylor had her, or had this case? Right now, you see how many, you know, motions she's filing in Brian Koberger's case. You know, she's a passionate defense attorney. Can you imagine if she had this and they have somebody in custody? Oof. Put your seatbelts on. Detective Barry Hartop and I used crime scene tape. The crime scene tape was placed along the southeast, blah, blah, blah. The crime scene tape was also attached to the two wooden fences located on either side of the driveway, located to the rear west of the residence. See that she's just filling in gaps. And along the side of the alley. You know, when I used to attend autopsies, you know what my report would say? They had the heading autopsy. See medical examiner's report. At such and such hours, I attended the medical examiner autopsy with Dr. So-and-so. Present with me was crime scene analyst so-and-so, ID number, blah, blah, blah. See report for full details. End of story. 10-8. Less is more. And the photographs and the doctor's report will take care of all the mishigosh. That's what they get paid for. That's what they do. You know, here Oh, by the way, I need to tell you where I put the crime scene tape. Okay, well, is this the photograph, officer? Yeah. Okay. In the alley located in the rear of the residence and also the front of the residence to ensure the security of the house. It's a day late and $1 short. Just, call coming in. Just letting you know. The Boulder County Coroner, Dr. John Myers, was the first person to enter the Ramsey residence after the search warrant had been obtained. Now, she makes it sound like this is a pristine situation. It's all good. Now the coroner's here. And since we now have a search warrant, he's the first guy into the building. Nothing to see here. It's tight. Okay. This goes back to what I said on yesterday's video about, the liquor store scenario. Hey, it's all tight. Don't worry about it. Nobody's been in there. And you press play on the video, and like 56 people come and go into the store. Nothing to see here. Okay. So this guy, okay, the coroner is the first guy since they got the search warrant. I'll bet you she didn't say, hey, I need to tell you something. What? I picked the kid up. The father said he found her in the basement in a wine cellar. Okay, I learned this later. I picked the kid up. I walked her up the stairway, or he walked her up the stairway, and he tells her, I bet you she didn't tell the ME all of that particular story yet. Just saying. I don't know, but that would be my gut based on what I'm seeing here. Dr. Myers entered the Ramsey residence at approximately 2023. Dr. Myers entered through the front door. Okay, there's a doctor in front of this guy's name, so we're going to know exactly what he did. And there's a detective in front of her name, and we knew exactly what was going on there. Dr. Myers placed protective booties on each of his feet before entering the residence. Dr. Myers also covered his hands with plastic gloves before entering the residence. Dr. Myers was told the location of JonBenet's body. Dr. Myers exited the residence through the front door. Dr. Myers told me he had examined JonBenet's body. Dr. Myers pronounced JonBenet dead. Dr. Myers told me he had observed ligature marks on JonBenet's neck. Dr. Myers had noted petechial hemorrhaging to JonBenet's eyes, i.e., she was alive when she was strangled. Based on my training and experience, it is my experience that petechial hemorrhaging to the given. Oh, dang it. Oh man. Okay, I don't have the next page on her training and experience. Dang it. All right, I'll get it. I'll find it. All right. Dr. Myers invited this is going to be at the autopsy here, this part. Dr. Sarah did conduct an examination. Conclusion of this meeting, our detective trio was going to be present for the examination, blah, blah, blah. I met with John Ramsey at his residence. Okay. Okay, I've got just 2 pages left. 2 pages. At approximately 21:30, Detective Sergeant John Mason and I met with John Ramsey at Blank's residence. Sergeant Mason and I met with John Ramsey in the office area room located in the basement of the Blank residence. Other persons present in the room included John Ramsey's brother, Jeff Ramsey, Blank, who introduced himself as an attorney and a stockbroker with Blank located in Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Blank, the physician for the Ramsey family, and Mike Burnham, who described himself as a friend of John Ramsey and also an attorney who was providing John Ramsey with advice. Okay? Happens all the time. Sergeant Mason and I met with John Ramsey for approximately 40 minutes. The following information was learned from this meeting. I asked to speak with Patsy. I told Dr. Blank that Patsy Ramsey was I was told by Dr. Blank was too medicated to talk to anyone. Dr. Blank had given Patsy Valium. Apparently that's suspicious. John was told that there was a broken window located in the basement of his home. He was told. Who told him that? The police? John told us that he had broken out the basement window approximately 4 to 5 months ago. Okay, so the conversation's going something like this, right? Mr. Ramsey, you know there's a broken window down in the basement. Yeah, I know. I broke that out like 5 or 6 months ago, 4 to 5 months ago. The window was located in the room where the Christmas decorations were kept. The grate covering the window well to this window was not secured. So they basically were the first one to come up with a stranger theory. Do you realize what they're doing here is they're projecting a stranger theory to John Ramsey? They're telling him there's a broken window, i.e. a point of entry potential. And by the way, that point of entry is covered by a grate. Okay. And the grate kicked in the basement. John had been locked out of his house. Okay. The window was located in the room where Christmas decorations were kept. The grate covering the window well to this window was not secured. John had been locked out of his house. John told us he removed the grate, kicked in the basement window, and gained entry to the house for this window. John told us he had not resecured the window, nor had he fixed the window which he had broken. So basically, they have a thought process that says, could this be a point of interest? And if so, we need to ask the family about it. And the father gives him an explanation. He says, look, I broke that window. I came in through that back window or through that window. Okay. So I'm glad you guys are pointing that out. Now, what's interesting about that, this is where Lou Smith grabbed the whole thing. Okay. Well, just because it's, a broken window, they were thinking, is this a point of entry for a stranger? So the theory here, they're throwing this stuff around. It's right here in a report. Okay. And he says, no, I broke the window out and it's been like that. I just, I haven't fixed it. I haven't fixed the window. John told us he had not resecured the window, nor had he fixed the window. So he knew it was broken. Sergeant Mason told John it would be helpful to our investigation if we could interview Patsy soon. Now, see, so they're going past this real fast. They want to go into, I find this interesting that this paragraph exists. Okay. They say that, hey, by the way, there's a broken window. And he goes, yeah, I did that. And I climbed in like 4 or 5 months ago. I haven't fixed it. Okay, I'm lazy. I'm rich. Okay. Do you guys think that's suspicious that somebody could have come through that window? Or what's the deal there? Okay. They introduced the thought, the investigators did, and it's right here. The Ramseys didn't say, hey, I found a broken window. Okay. Because it's in her report. John was told that there was a broken window located in the basement of his home, i.e. John Ramsey was told there was a broken window located in the basement of his home. Sergeant Mason had told John it would be helpful to the investigation if we could interview he and Patty as soon as possible. Well, they're talking to him. They want to talk to both of them together. Sergeant Mason requested we interview John and Patsy on Saturday morning, December 28th. Dr. Bufe told Sergeant Mason he did not know if Patsy would be available for an interview at that time. So the doctor is given a medical opinion. Hey, we're not sure if she's capable of doing this yet. Said that Patsy was in a fragile emotional state and he did not want to subject her to anything which would further upset her. Okay. This is not a standoff. This is a medical opinion. No definitive answer was given regarding the request to interview John. Let's see here. Wait for a minute. Why was John locked out of the house 4 to 5 months earlier? Did his keys go missing, possibly stolen? Great point. Great point. Unknown. Great point. Great point. Unknown. No definitive answer. Again, this is post-homicide. They're writing this information and they're filling in the gaps. Okay, well, they're not talking to us. Well, that's suspicious. Yeah, I know, but remember the doctor said she's like out of it. And by the way, while we were there, she was like ditzy to the point where we called an ambulance for her. Yeah, well, yeah. So maybe we need to, back off a little bit here and, take our time with this. Let's work on the garrote and let's work on, the pretzel on the table and see what we've got. And that way we can line up our ducks. And if we do, have some confrontational type of interviews with their attorneys, we can talk to them about it and say, hey, these are the inconsistencies that we found, and we want to ask your client about them. Okay? We think there's some problems here. Okay? No problem. We used to do it all the time. I again asked John if he could think of anyone who might be a possible suspect in this investigation. John told me that he could only think of 2 persons from Access Graphics who might be considered a suspect. John had previously given me the name of one of these individuals, i.e. he was consistent, blank. The other was a person who had been fired from Access Graphics approximately 3 years ago. So he's thinking, I got to go back. Let me think. John told me that he talked to the person in charge of human resources at Access Graphics. John had asked if a potential employee could be asked to be questioned or whether or not they smoked. There's a question of whether or not they smoke. So now smoking is important in this investigation. John was told this question could be asked. The male employee was asked this question. The male employee stated he was not a smoker. After the male employee was hired, it was discovered that he was a smoker. John said the man was fired because he had lied on his application, not because he was a smoker. The man sued Access Graphics. The lawsuit was reported in the local newspaper. John told me that the lawsuit was settled. The former employee received $15,000 settlement. John said he had not received any contact from this employee after the lawsuit had been settled. Now, that's an interesting piece of tidbit here. So I have a question for you, Mr. Ramsey. Yeah. Did anybody smoke? Any of your previous employees? Well, I don't know. I need to ask my staff. Okay. What we don't have here is maybe this follow-up question is, why are you asking? Are there cigarette butts somewhere that somebody took a photograph of or collected or something to that effect? Because the employees are asking, or whether or not or the cops are asking whether they not or not they smoked. John was told this question could be asked. Okay. Well, can I ask that question? Yes, you may ask if the employees are smoking. Okay. That's an interesting point. And so, no, I want to answer a quick question here. No, Goofy Girl. However, I think we should consider the Camel Blues cigarette butts that were collected at the crime scene post JonBenet's homicide. Okay, that's the one where the 14-year-old or 12-year-old was actually essayed in her bedroom a couple of months after, and she went to the dance class, the same dance class as JonBenet. In criminal behavior analysis, that's what you would call a contact point. where two victims came from the same, water hole, for lack of a better term. And the hunter saw both of them at the same water hole. And if the hunter smoked Camel Blues, which if you want to see a whole video on that, I did a video before this, and there's DNA in those Camel Blues, okay, that would be interesting. That would be very, very interesting. John told us it was a difficult time of year for him, or year for him. John told me that his daughter, Beth, had been killed in a car accident January 8th, 92. John also told me that this was a difficult time for Patsy. Patsy had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer 2 years ago. Patsy had undergone treatment and the cancer had been removed. John Ramsey told us that he was thinking about offering a reward. John did not ask any questions about the results of JonBenet's autopsy. John told us that there would be a private memorial service for JonBenet at St. John's Presbyterian Church in Boulder on Sunday afternoon. I've had many family members, not ask about any, craziness about that. That's another good point, Nomi. Brown marks, were they cigarette burns? Great point. Great point. The memorial service would be held at 1400. The memorial service is not open to the public. After the conclusion of the memorial service, John and his family would be flying to Atlanta. JonBenet's funeral was to be held Tuesday, 31 January, or December 31 in Atlanta. JonBenet was going to be buried next to her half-sister, Beth Ramsey. When Sergeant Mason and I left John, we told him we would phone him in the morning to arrange for interviews with he and Patsy. So they have an interview with the dad, and the doctors told him, look, I don't know if she's ready for discussing anything yet. Okay. She's medicated. She's in shock. There's a funeral coming. There's a lot going on here. But he tells the father, hey, we just want to let you know we're going to call you in the morning to arrange an interview for you and your wife. What's the rush? That is a key piece of evidence. That is a key piece of evidence. I keep going back to it because it has to be applied specifically for a reason. And so the question is, and by the way, I have not read anything in the autopsy report that said that there had been a consistent evidence finding that JonBenet was consistently SA'd. This is specific intent. Again, I go back to this. This weapon has bothered me since the day Lou Smith told me about it back in 1997. When I got the phone call from him, actually from my supervisor through him, okay, there is nothing on this report here, this autopsy report, and it's right in front of us, that says there was consistency with history of SA on this child. So immediately the question is, okay, why, if you're going to keep the family in the circle, why would a 9-year-old brother do this? All right, that doesn't make sense. And this is what that could have been, that cigarette burn. We don't know exactly what it is. I've heard different doctors give different opinions. I've seen many burns like this. I thought it was a cigarette burn. I could be wrong, but it is consistent with a cigarette burn. But why would a 9-year-old brother do that? And then, or even more importantly, why would the mother or the father do that as, quote, staging? This is not staging. That child was alive, and the petechiae proves it, when she was strangled. It is not an afterthought. It is during the act. During the act. Okay. So, what would be the proper steps for a parent to take if a child went missing and a note says not to call the police? Most families can't pay large amounts and would need to contact the police. Excellent question, Unleashed Rainbow. Love your name. And yes, you do call the police. You call the cops. That's exactly what you would do, in my opinion, based on that question. Okay? I don't see anything that's completely jumping out initially when the cops got there right away. Okay? I see that the parents, were probably, distraught. The officer noted that in his report, Officer French. I think the officer was young. It's just my opinion. And that he, was kind of in over his head right away. He didn't know exactly what he had. And then, the department as a whole, it just started to go downhill from there rapidly. I've talked about it at the beginning of this video, the beginning of the one yesterday. Immediately, they should have shut the curtains down, i.e., the case right away. I want to show you a book real fast. All right, I'm back. Okay, so this is the Child Abduction Protocol Manual. Okay, this manual, it gives you all of the steps that you should be taking, and I've trained this man. I've taught this class so many times. Okay, the critical phases, and this was put together by FBI agent Mary Ellen O'Toole. The initial assessment of a kidnapping, case investigative priorities, critical phases. You have what we call there's a 3-hour space, and you have a 3-hour time frame. Okay, this stuff is taught nationwide. Okay, every law enforcement agency around the country is taught these protocols. Now, today, in modern time even, they've gotten better. They have the card teams, and there are card teams in regions around the country. And those are child abduction response groups. And they're made up of FBI agents and sometimes even field agents from a local jurisdiction in a local area. Okay. And they get on the scene pretty rapidly. Okay. And what happens at that point, once they're on the scene, they can make an assessment, pretty quickly, very quickly. And what they use is what we call, like I've explained, the victim risk continuum. And that victim risk continuum tells us, high, medium, low, environment, situation, circumstance. And we have to, trust the science on that. These are hundreds and hundreds of cases that have gone into the study of that victim risk continuum. So you actually, if your child goes missing, I'm going to tell you, you have the key time frame is 3 hours. Okay, you have 3 hours, and you have to operate under that premise. Okay, you have got to immediately call the authorities. If you have a picture, have it available for your child. Okay. was Fleet W's DNA cleared? Misty, I don't have the answer to that. Maybe somebody else in the chat knows that one. And thank you so much for your kindness. You're very kind. But we have 3 hours. We call that, the critical phase. The reason behind that is because suspects who are going to risk taking a child, okay, and I'm talking children now. A suspect who's going to risk taking a child is going to lower his risk or her risk. Okay? Females abducting children much rarer than males. 99% of all children abductions are with male because the motive for that is SA. And I did a whole thing on, you can go see it in my playlist, on what the numbers tell us, what children, are most vulnerable in terms of suspectology, what the suspect looks for in the victim. Okay. There's a family presentation I put together that you can watch with your children, and it gives you solutions on how to handle if your child goes missing, if your child's abducted, and what a child can do to prevent abduction. Okay. And so those are the kind of things as a parent or grandparent, friend, neighbor, okay, you have 3 hours to respond. And that's why the 10-minute time frame, if it's correct, i.e. mother said she got up, within 10 minutes she called, she looked for the child, couldn't find the child, looked down, there's that note. I'm not talking about the pretzel yet. I call it the pretzel, okay? Because I still want to stay with the chips. Because the bag of chips is where the victim was found and how the victim was murdered, okay? And then we have to ask ourselves, okay, why is this bag of chips spilt all over the table? I need to assemble that. Because once that is assembled, the note becomes clearer to an investigator, okay? You don't start by saying, here is some, medication, go ahead and take it. Well, what do I have? We don't know yet, but we've been given this medication out, so go ahead and take it because you're acting like you could have this problem. And that's what we had here. You had inexperienced investigators go, you know what? He's making weird looks. He's looking down the hallway. He's, checking his mail. The time has gone by in the 2 hours. He's not, mentioned that the time has passed. Okay. Well, what she's doing, what that investigator was doing, and it's not really her total fault. It is because she should have known better, i.e. trained up a little better. And she should have checked her ego at the door and said, you know what? I need more people over here. I need help. Okay. If you think I'm going to sit here by myself and, work through this whole process, why officers were leaving and then later on say, yeah, but I was there by myself. Well, that's your fault. That's your fault as a police officer. Because, there's no excuse for it at all. Okay. And, we call that the John Wayne syndrome, where the badge itself, this is you can't hurt me. See all that back there? All that stuff? All that stuff is just that. It's stuff. It's just stuff. Okay. It doesn't prevent, using this as a tool, saying, hey, everybody out. Okay. No, I'm sorry. There are times when you have to step up and say, you know what? I made some mistakes. These are the mistakes I made. Okay. And it's time to rectify that and move forward. But if this DNA hypothetically ever came back to a stranger, or if it comes back to a family member, it is what it is. That's it. Okay. Now you're in the ballpark and you can explain the pretzel. Okay. But you've got to eliminate all this other stuff first in the bag of chips. And the bag of chips, unfortunately, has been tainted so much that there's so many doors open for the defense to come in and say, well, yeah, but that's not according to protocol. That's not according to protocol. That's not how you were trained. And all they do is they mess up the narrative of the truth. And that's what a defense attorney is supposed to do. That's their job. We can't blame them for that. They're good people. 90% of all defense attorneys that I've ever met are great people. There's a couple problems, just like prosecutors. There's problems there too, right? Just like cops, right? Not everybody's a great cop or an investigator. Let's be honest about it. And because that way you learn, when you learn, I screwed up. I shouldn't have done that. No, you're right. You shouldn't have, Christopher. You should have done it differently. I had a guy one night, I was doing real fast. I was doing a bar check. I was in Vice at the time. I went into this bar, got this guy outside, ID'd myself, and a second later, I find myself almost knocked out. I had like, the old cartoons with a bird spinning around you. Well, this guy sucker punched me and knocked me, kazuzu. I was laying on the ground going, what the heck just happened? That guy hit me so hard. Okay? But I didn't see it coming. That was my fault for not seeing it coming. Okay. And I learned a lesson that day that this thing, back then I was in Vice and, you just tin them, say, hey, Popo, we're going to hook you up or let's go on outside and talk. When as I was escorting the guy outside, my partner was behind me. He just turned around and boom, just nailed me. And I was down for the count. And, he took off and it was a funny story. He ran over a fence, went across a freeway. We had dogs on the other side. I wasn't there because they were attending to me, but the stories that came back were great. Okay. And anyway, we ended up getting the guy and hooking him up and, battery on a police officer. He went down for the count. But it was my fault. I let my guard down. Okay. There was another way of doing it. Now, it was his fault for hitting me, but it was my fault for opening the door. And that's in this situation here. I mean, you tell the dad, hey, when you get a chance, put the kid down. Put the kid down. Hey, end of story. Put him down. Okay. Everybody out. Let's go. Because you can get to where did you find him? Where did you find her? What was going on? How did you open the, blah, blah, blah. You can get to that story. That's a no-brainer. Okay. But once the kid is down, you don't pick the child up, the deceased child that you're gonna put in your report. Yeah, I noticed lividity. I noticed, blah, 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 all this other stuff. I noticed mucus coming out of the kid. I noticed petechiae. I noticed she had a strangulation, mechanical mechanism around her neck, blah, blah, blah. And then say, but they were kneeling around the child. And, so blah, blah, blah. It's like, really? Don't you think you made a mistake? Don't you think there's some accountability there that you could have screwed up something and maybe did and probably did? That's accountability. And, once you accept that, then you accept the repercussions that come along with it. You see this book? This book here is about a little girl by the name of Stephanie Crow in San Diego County. They've made a movie about it. They wrote books about it. Here's another one here written by Dr. Paul Tracy. They've made 48 Hours. They made a movie called The Interrogation of Michael Crow. Okay. I'm listed in that case. Okay. And I went through heck for like 11 years because I said, you know what? Here were the mistakes. And they ended up arresting a guy, putting him on trial. His name was Richard Tuitt. And I had his attorney on here, Brad Patton, who's an amazing attorney. If you guys ever need an attorney in San Diego, look up the name Brad Patton, okay, or Paul Finkst, or Herb Weston. These are great people, or Jimmy Dix. Those are all 4 great names for a defense attorney in San Diego if you ever needed them. Anyway, I said to the investigators, that's not the guy. You got the wrong guy. And I was sued for it. Complaints and all this other stuff. And guess what? It turned out that he went to trial, okay? And ultimately he was found not guilty by multiple juries. And not one person ever came to me and say, you know what, outside of, Brad and others, that said, yeah, hey, you know what, you were on target there. Yeah, there's books written about it. This is probably the best one. Okay. But that's my point. When you're wrong, you say you're wrong. Even though you go against the system, it's the right thing to do. And it's always the right thing to do to tell the truth no matter what the consequences. Tell the truth, the consequences will follow. It's our responsibility in the law enforcement community, and I can tell you that 99% of law enforcement officers, actually 98% of law enforcement officers are good, solid people. They go to work, they want to do the right thing, but sometimes ego gets in the way and they want to sit back and, say, well, we didn't screw up, we didn't mess up. Well, yeah, you did. Sometimes we do. Okay? Sometimes we do. But they're not a bunch of conspiracy, folks, where they all get together and say, okay, let's go kill, make sure there's a crime committed here, and then let's go ahead and cover it up. That's just ludicrous speed. But anyway, so that's my rant on that. I hope that tonight's program was beneficial to you. I sincerely and just wholeheartedly just thank you so much for supporting us here. I mean, Karen and I, we just love you guys. We love having the opportunity to communicate with you. And Dr. Gary is pretty sick. He's been dealing with, I think, rotavirus, and so keep him in your prayers, and please keep these families in your prayers. No matter what the consequences are going to be, they deserve justice. Everybody deserves justice. I.e., more specifically, JonBenet needs justice. She needs justice. And if the Cold Case Foundation was ever asked to get involved in this, I know for a fact we would jump on this in a heartbeat. And see what could be brought to the table. So anyway, God bless you all on this wonderful Monday night. Thank you so much for being here. I know Hanukkah got over just recently, so shalom to all of my Jewish friends and out there. We sure love you, and family members out and about. So take care. Aloha. Continue to pray for the people in Maui. They're recovering in Lahaina, and maybe one day I should do a show on that. What's going on out there? Have some of those folks. So anyway, aloha, folks. Have a good night.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.